Awesome. We're gonna go ahead and get started. I mean, based on the chat and where everybody's from and what institutions are in this webinar, we are really here to talk about a problem that's present across the country. You're here to talk about check fraud in 2025, specifically Treasury check fraud, um, and how can we mitigate it as the financial ecosystem? And so, by way of agenda, we'll do a little housekeeping. I will let the panel introduce themselves. David will present some research. I'll do a quick demo of SentiLink TCVS, and I'll talk about what that is. And then we'll give Jen the floor to talk a little bit about Treasury check fraud at Citizens Bank and how they are working to fight it. Um, we'll do a dedicated Q&A session at the end, but if throughout the session I'll be monitoring it as our panelists are speaking, and if there are relevant questions, I'll bring them up. So please feel free to put those questions in the Q&A tool as we go. And just one last housekeeping note, other than the Q&A, we are recording this and we'll send that out to all attendees if you need to share it with anybody to the email you used to register. And it is great to meet all of you. My name is Abhi Puranam. I'm on the product team here at SentiLink. Been in a number of industries, and it's been awesome to work in fraud these last 6 months. I'm really excited to introduce my two fraud experts that are joining me. David, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Sure. Good to be with you, Abby, today, and with you, Jen. I'm David Maimon. I'm the head of fraud insight in SentiLink, and I've been studying fraud during the last 12 years or so.
Amazing. And Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, I'm Jen Martin, and I am the head of fraud and disputes at Citizens Bank, but about 8 years in leading fraud programs at various institutions.
Amazing. And we have a great session there. We're so excited to talk to you guys about check fraud and how we can fight it. So I want to go ahead and have David start leading the conversation from here and present some of his findings and research about the life cycle of Treasury check fraud.
Sure. So it should be really an informal presentation. We don't want it to sort of take over. Feel free to ask questions. Abby, feel free to jump in. Jen, of course.
Of
Uh,
course.
we just wanted to provide some context for the issue we're experiencing right now in the U.S., right, with respect to the stolen, forged Department of Treasury checks, and sort of try to figure out why we're seeing what we're seeing and at this point, which is a dramatic increase in the volume of forged and stolen Department of Treasury checks. I've been very vocal about the fact that checks have been stolen from our mail starting 2021. A lot of personal checks that we've seen out there starting that time period. A lot of business checks, some Department of Treasury checks at the time. But then, the industry, and by industry, I mean the banks, the government, along with the fintech industry, gotten better and better in sort of taming the issue of personal and business checks. I mean, now, we have ways to sort of deal with this issue. Banks takes more time to clear checks. And so at some point, Telegram, is also trying to be more effective in shutting down markets where a lot of the stolen checks are being offered for sale. And so at some point, criminals realize that maybe they want to shift gears and work on checks, which at the end of the day will give them more, right? I mean, they'll be able to use more and get more benefits than the personal and business checks, which they're still intercepting and they're still working with, but to a lesser degree to what we've seen in 2022, 2023 and 2024 to a degree. And so in 2024, I would say, we started to see, at least from where I sit, a shift from just using personal checks and business checks when they try to intercept them and sort of deposit them in drop accounts that they create, to using and forging Department of Treasury checks. And so they obtain the checks usually in the same way they get the personal and business checks by taking over USPS collection boxes, residential boxes. They simply steal the checks from the mailboxes. Um, Mid 2023, I would say we're seeing more and more evidence for insiders within USPS harvesting those checks. And the picture to our left is a testimony for that. We have a lot of videos showing insiders showing and demonstrating their access to the mail. Um, and that's unfortunate. But to make long story short, folks are stealing those checks from collection boxes, from residential collection boxes, from within USPS, and then offering those checks up for sale on Telegram and other online platforms. In the past, folks were washing the checks. In order to work with the checks, you need to sort of change the content of the check. And we'll talk a little bit about, what you can do with the stolen Department of Treasury checks. But, in the past, folks tried to or focus more on washing the checks using chemicals. But at some point in 2024, I would say, mid 2023, early 2024, we started seeing folks moving into cooking those checks. Cooking is essentially manufacturing forged checks, and we've seen that going on in the context of personal checks, of course, where folks essentially scanned the personal check into their computers, worked with the signatures, and manufacture those fake checks. In the context of Department of Treasury checks, the templates are out there. So what the criminals did or are doing at this point, and if you can play the video, is they work with software like Photoshop, bring in templates of Department of Treasury checks in the software. And I apologize for the music. This is about my,
It was not our choice. That comes with the fraud video.
Maybe this should come with a disclaimer. All the images you will see here essentially comes from the online fraud ecosystem. So, this is fraudsters telling us and the ecosystem essentially how they do what they do. So folks are using Photoshop in order to cook those checks. And if we go to the next slide, you will see that at this point, in addition to the software, they also have all the relevant hardware, which allows them to print those checks. They have the right paper, they have the UV marks, they have the watermarks, and so at the end of the day, they just create those replicas of the checks. And when they do that, they use the website that the Department of Treasury have put for us and for the financial industry to verify the legitimacy of a check. So oftentimes what we will see is when a vendor tries to sort of assert trustworthiness and sort of convey that the checks they are producing are spot on, they will upload an image like we see to our left, where they will see the check, the Photoshop, along with Department of Treasury website, where the information on the check and the Department of Treasury website will match. And that is essentially what we see in the two images to our right. Granted, and this is something I assume we all know at this point, well, some of the information on the Department of Treasury checks will match with the information the Department of Treasury website will have. One of the key element on the check, and that is the name, is missing from the website. And so the criminals are taking advantage of this, of course, and they cook the check in such way that they will have the symbol, the number of the check on the forged checks, but the name will be different, sort of speaking. So at the end of the day, once they're done, if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to get, if you purchase the check from them, or if you want to steal the check and cook it yourself, you will have a very good quality replica, like we're seeing in the video here. Obviously, here we don't have the first and last name as well as and the address, but the quality of the check will be very good. And this is the type of checks that financial institutions will see on their doors when folks are trying to sort of deposit the checks and cash them. So if you go to the next slide, you know, we'll try to sort of understand and answer why Department of Treasury checks are so valuable at this point. As I indicated earlier, starting mid 2023, with the bank's attentions, financial industry attention to the issue of check fraud, folks shifted gears, sort of speaking, to work with Department of Treasury checks. Because, and this is, my opinion on this, because while personal and business checks now takes more time to clear, the available balance on Department of Treasury checks needs to be available. I mean, it's not the available balance. It's at least the first $500 and $525 on the check needs to be available to the client 24 hours after the check has been deposited. And that is a really interesting regulation that plays to the fraudster's advantage, right? Because sometimes the bank will have questions about the check. They will try to get some information from the relevant parties in the IRS or other parties, and if they get no answer, they will have to clear the check, and they will take the loss of at least the first $5,525. Jen has shared with us that this limit will increase to close to $7,000 starting in July of 2025. So, to me, that is why these checks are so vulnerable. And I don't know, Jen, if you have other thoughts about, that.
Yeah, I mean, it is exactly what you say, right? Like there's, just an increased sense of legitimacy on these. There's a carve out in Reg CC that says, make these funds available faster because they're government issued and they're more secure. And so that does bring more risk to these items.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, those checks are vulnerable. It's fairly easy to cook those checks. And so once you have a cooked check at hand, what fraudsters will do is they will try to cash them or deposit them in their bank accounts. And if we go to the next slide, we will see some of the images that we often see in many of the online fraud platforms or the online fraud markets, which are hosted by a lot of social media platforms out there, which essentially facilitate opportunities for the fraudsters to advertise what they do. So oftentimes what we will see is we will see fraudsters presenting the forged or stolen checks along with debit cards, indicating that those checks essentially will be deposited in the bank account. We will see screenshots of folks' smartphones after depositing those checks, showing evidence that the checks could be deposited easily. We're seeing a lot of criminals sharing ATM deposit slips with images of the checks on them, like we see in the image to our right. And if we go to the next slide, we will see them bragging about the their ability to actually deposit the checks and get confirmation for both the deposit and oftentimes 24 hours after the checks have been deposited, flashing and spreading cash, which they claim come from that specific deposit. So oftentimes, and the MO that we're seeing, the modus operandi that we're seeing with those stolen checks involve criminals stealing folks' identities or using their own identities in order to deposit those checks. So, in many cases, and we're in the process of really trying to quantify how much of it is actually happening, folks will take the identities off the checks, simply steal them. They will try to gather information about the identity on the check and try to create a drop account, stealing the legitimate sort of check owner's identity from the check. So they will take the identity, they will go to the online fraud ecosystem, try to get some interesting information and important information which will complement the PIIs that they have in their hands. So they will need social security number, they will need date of birth, they will go to the bank, they will try to open a drop account using that name. And then, they will groom the account for a period of time. Then they will deposit the check and try to run away with the money. Other times, and we've seen a lot of it happening, sharing some information with our partners, and the information we share with them is essentially ATM deposit slips with indication that Department of Treasury checks have been deposited in their account. What we've seen is first-party fraudsters, so individuals who essentially took the check, removed the name on the check, and then deposited the check in their own bank accounts after they added their own name on the account. And you know, the stories and the cases we worked on are really interesting. We've seen 18 years old folks depositing $25,000 in their own bank account using Department of Treasury checks as the vehicle for that. Um, we've seen like first timers doing that. We've seen professional fraudsters doing that with higher balances. We have a lot of evidence suggesting that uh, unfortunately adolescents and youth are getting more and more involved in that because they think they can run away with $5,000, not really understanding the repercussions for the future, for their own identity if they engage in this type of activity. But we see a lot of that. In the context of business checks, what we see, and this is a really interesting development, we're seeing folks lifting business identities and stealing business identities, opening bank accounts for those businesses, and then running away with millions of dollars. We have a really interesting case we worked on a couple of months ago. These two checks that you guys are seeing on the screen right now are checks our team was able to find in 2023. These two checks belong to the same company. Once we've seen the balance on the checks, and you've seen we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, we reached out to the owner of the company and we alerted him for this issue. The owner of the company thanked us and asked us to find three more checks he was missing. I was able to find another check. Couldn't find the other two. Sent it over to him. And then the morning after I sent the third check, I got a phone call from him explaining to me what happened. So essentially, what the criminals did was they took the company name, they added an S at the end of the company name, and then they opened a bank account for the business, stealing the owner's identity. Um, and after they done that, they deposited the five checks, amounting to the amount of $2 million, and ran away. It was a really interesting story, and so we wanted to sort of validate and see whether we can find some of the breadcrumbs, both in open source information as well as in our own database. So one of the things I've done was I ran the company name in open corporates and the State Department. I was able to find the original department the original company incorporation date, and you see it on the screen right now, October 5th, 2022. And then, I was able to find the newly created company name as well. And you see that the company was created in January 9th, 2023. Uh, Unfortunately, I can't share the names and show how similar the names are. But you're gonna have to trust me that the names are very similar, and that there's only an S, and sort of the company name, which is composed out of three words, is just condensed into one word. In addition to that, going to testing our databases, we were able to find, if you go back to the slide we just showed, yeah, I mean, you see the incorporation date of this company is January 9th, 2023. When we started looking for the identity of the owner of the company in our database, we saw that someone, if you go to the next slide, you will see it, someone had used the identity to try and create an account with a telecommunication company in February of 2023, which is, again, really mind-boggling. I mean, you actually see the breadcrumbs, and the address folks were using is a historical address that this person had on his historical address summary. So we are seeing more and more of this happening. And if we go to the next slide.
David, I want to get to a question someone was asking about the
Sure.
fraud mode. someone Nadine was asking, how do fraudsters get the special ink and the paper and the ability to make the holographs? Like, aren't these things proprietary, protected by the Treasury Department?
You would think so, right? I mean, I've seen folks getting some of the hardware on Amazon. So
It's surprising.
yeah, I mean, and so to tell the truth, I mean, after talking to a lot of DMV's commissioners during the last 3 years or so, one of the DMV commissioner I'm very close with, we talk a lot about the issue of driver licenses and fake driver licenses and
Mhm.
how good the quality of fake driver licenses we are seeing today when you sort of compare them to the original driver licenses. Um, so this particular DMV commissioner told me that when he went out to sort of purchase the machines that produces the driver licenses, he was promised that, you know, this specific vendor will sell the machine to that specific DMV only, right? I mean, nobody else will sort of be able to purchase it. But then a year after, this specific DMV commissioner told me he was able to find that other people getting those machines as well.
Yeah.
So, vendors are trying to make money, unfortunately, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, folks are trying to make money and they will sell their commodities all over. So some of the hardware you can actually get on Amazon.
That's surprising. And then, several people chimed in, seeing the similar business MO. Jen, I know you've seen similar things as well on the business side.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And again, I always go back to even our fraud friends have an ROI, right? And so like that bit of an investment to, once you've got that item that's 350,000 or whatever, it's worth their investment and their time to go through all these extra steps, right? And so like I think that's a like next level of sophistication and investment into these schemes just to make sure that they can make it go through. So I think it's been like an evolution, which I think is interesting in the space. Like a couple of years ago, Treasury check fraud looked like one thing, and now it's a lot of stolen identity, the corporation identity stealing, and that really the struggle with that, like in the case that David raised, as a financial institution, we may not know that until we get the reclamation. So funds are long gone, that fraudsters moved on, probably closed their accounts, right? And then we'll hear from the victim sometime later through the IRS to say, hey, we want to reclaim those funds. And then you just start to get these large dollar reclamations coming through your processes, and that's when you realize that that was not the true party on those items. So as I think is another benefit that the fraudsters see in the product is that a lot of the times the victim won't know that they didn't get their items in the mail or that they're lost, or just a way that I would get back in touch with Treasury and say, hey, I think my item's been stolen, can you do a stop payment and reissue, right? Like those processes are a little bit harder. And so even once the victim realizes that they're not going to get that item, like it takes a while to get the bank notified, and then the IRS, like the Treasury, just comes and takes the funds back, or IRS. So it favors the bad actor in a lot of different ways.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the interesting thing, just going back to the trends and just making sure that we're all on the same page with respect to what we're seeing. Jen and I talk a lot about, trends and some of the things that I'm seeing, and whether I mean, she gives me hints with respect to whether she's seeing the same thing, so to speaking. So, one of the interesting things that I can sort of break here that we're seeing a dramatic decrease in the volume of stolen checks, stolen stolen and forged personal and business checks out there. But unfortunately, and we have it documented, right? I mean, so essentially, we've been collecting data systematically from 84 Telegram markets starting 2019, pretty much. And so, I can say that last month we were at a point where we were in August of 2021, where we sort of first saw this dramatic increase. But we're not talking about tens of thousands of checks. We're talking about maybe 2,000 checks in the month of April we were able to find on those platforms. But what had changed is the proportion of Department of Treasury checks we're seeing there. So if in the past we were seeing more personal and business checks out there, now we're seeing more and more Department of Treasury checks out there. This is diagram, and this figure essentially present official data coming from FinCEN and disclosing the number of stolen and forged Department of Treasury checks which were reported to FinCEN between January and November of 2024. The 2025 data is still not available, so we're gonna have to do with this one. You guys see that the volume of SARS report relevant to Department of Treasury checks is still very high, and it's kind of going in line with what we are seeing. So if we go to the next slide, Abby, you'll be able to see the trend that we observed on Telegram in our 84 Telegram markets that we are observing systematically. So the interesting thing that we are seeing is that between May and December of 2003 and 2024, there's consistently a decrease in the volume of Department of Treasury checks we've seen. But if you look at the volume of checks we're able to find in 2024 and compare it to the volume of checks we're able to find in 2023, you'll see that the numbers are dramatically different. We do see significant increase in the volume of Department of Treasury checks that we're documenting on a monthly basis, unfortunately. And so this speaks volume to the fact that this issue is still around, and we definitely need to address it.
Yeah, and we just had a question on this topic, and Jen would love your take here. If you hadn't heard the news in March, the administration issued an executive order to start phasing out these paper checks, citing, among other things, the sort of fraud and waste that comes that we're discussing here. And they're targeting a date of September 30th. Now, whether we'll be able to meet that date or delays may occur, remains to be seen, but change is needed. Jen, you had a, interesting thought about how fraudsters will sort of adapt, after, this sort of phase out occurs.
Yeah, so also interesting last week on the Treasury issued an RFI kind of around some thought leadership of like, hey, how do we, one of the reasons checks are still produced is you have a large unbanked or underbanked population, people that just cannot accept electronic payments. And so what are other means that we can get payments out if you are not able to, have it direct deposited into an account? And in that list was like prepaid debit cards again. And so we all think back to the pandemic and when states had to release lots of unemployment funds out to consumers, right? What we saw was this big surge in drop accounts and stolen identities to get those funds electronically distributed, and a lot of those came out on prepaid cards and some of these other means. And so the fraud will not go away. It will pivot. And I expect it, like we'll see that heightened, increase in identity theft and, opening drop accounts to take in ACH payments, any kind of prepaid card that's issued will have risk. And so, like it will change, like this vector will improve, but like as we know in fraud, it's like always squeezing the balloon. And so we're gonna squeeze one part of the balloon, and it's gonna come to another place because like there's real money to be had in these accounts, in these checks. And so they're always going to be an incentive to pursue these funds. So I think as Treasury thinks about what replaces checks, like identity verification is going to become critical to make sure that funds are going to right party, and then how that will be tracked through the ecosystem. And then I think it's really a lot of your existing electronic payments controls is where folks will want to then focus.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jen. One question coming up that I'd like to address, for both David and Jen, is there any risk of somebody double dipping where they might report, like deposited check, reported as stolen, or that like was stolen under identity theft, and then getting like a reissue back from the IRS. Do we see any of that MO out there, David, from what you're seeing, or Jen, at Citizens? Do you suspect any of that?
I'll defer to Jen on this one.
Yes, yeah. I mean, not as in much volume, but there's definitely first party fraud, and I think if as it pivots more electronic payments, it'll probably actually make that even a little bit easier.
Definitely. Awesome. So, I saw a couple people mentioning the new TCVS functionality. I want to just talk a little bit about a SentiLink TCVS. Um, which we built based off the V2 of the Treasury Check API, which was released last winter in 2024, which expands the verification of Treasury checks from the original set of information they had, the amount, the serial number, the symbol number, to include the payee name. And really, it's a huge benefit for everybody because it just narrows how a fraudster can extract funds, right? A first-party fraudster can't just wash a check into their name anymore if you're using this, um, or you can't wash it into an identity, that you control that might be stolen and has to match the original check. Um, and we're offering this through the dashboard, through the API. What we heard from a lot of banks and financial institutions that they're strapped for technical resources to be able to integrate this and like turn it into a desktop app. I'm glad to hear that some banks have been able to create this internally. Uh, as well as the Treasury Department itself being overwhelmed with the amount of requests for an API. So we've built a dashboard and our own version of the API. We're releasing it free for all financial institutions. You just have to contact us and we'll get you set up. And we already have more than 50 financial institutions verifying Treasury checks through us. We verified more than 100,000 checks and have more than 1,000 weekly users in the dashboard version. Now, uh, I'm gonna quickly just demo the dashboard version for you guys so you guys can see it. But just breaking down the anatomy of a check. So you'll see this sort of required information is the simple number, the serial number, the amount. You'll need the sort of payee name or beneficiary name, as well as the bank RTN. Cool. I'll switch over and just quickly show, the SentiLink portal. Um, Yeah, so here we are. So this is how it looks like in the dashboard. Um, I have like some sample data here to show you. So we put in the uh, sample information, and then I'll use my own name. And it's really that straightforward. You can have a teller or anybody else do this and put it in, and it'll come back if the name entered doesn't match the name in Treasury's records. It'll return back as a mismatch. Now you layer in, more fraudulent activity and say this is, somebody, trying to, both change the name and the amounts. That'll verify as well. And so then, you'll see the mismatch of the check amount being 1,100, as well as James McCoy instead of Jacob McCoy trying to deposit this check. Um, you can get access to this, by just requesting a demo on sentilink.com, and we'll get back to you to get access. We don't have a public version that anybody can access like the TCVS. That's just, some security constraints on our side. But this is totally free for financial institutions. We will get you set up with an account, if you request it. Now, just, going back to presentation.
While you're doing that, I'll say we were excited to be early trial candidates for the tool, and the Benny name is a big leap forward. I think we were all using TCVS, but without really validating the name on the item, that was a gap. And it's twofold. I've seen a lot of in the chain about like reasonable cause or reasonable doubt. Like you need to have a reasonable standard. If you're gonna place a hold on that item, it's more to have the Benny match or not match. If you can now go back and demonstrate, hey, this failed on all 3 components or 2 of the 3, right? That really helps make your case why there's a reasonableness to place an extended hold on those funds and that item. And then, but on the other side too, what we were able to do is clear a lot of items too. So before, where we were making our best guess effort, and so that feels suspicious, new account, that amount doesn't seem right, like, and we were having to kind of create that narrative in our mind of trying to make the right decision. In many cases, all of those components would validate, and it wasn't fraud, and so it helped us also clear a false positive. And so we use I know we're gonna get into my section here in a minute, but like we have several different use cases for the tool. And the team was on site when we first started to use it, and it was really cool just to take some of our work, like kind of right off the desk, and see how it performs.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so we are going to get into it, Jen. So let's talk about, and I think you wanted to start with account opening and how you're really trying to fight this like throughout the life cycle, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think this, again, like I said, it's going to become increasingly important, even after like checks have been out of the ecosystem, and now you're working with electronic payments. You want to make sure that you're not enabling those drop accounts to be created. So having those right controls at origination, DDA origination, around synthetic IDs, stolen identity, all of those different attributes, like the stolen business, right? As you're opening the small business accounts, is that incorporated yesterday out of an apartment, and or that address is associated with a field and not an actual business address, right? So in many cases, having an account is step 1 of being able to deposit the item or take it in electronically. So I think the heart of mitigation starts at the account origination. I always say that to my team when we see these things. Like, my team knows, like, my first question is going to be, how is that originated? What do we know about the origination? How did it score? Why did we open that account? What verification did we do? What could we do on a day 2 to see, like, then how did that account perform? Was it like 0 balance and then $100 a couple days? Did they cure it for 90 days and then put in this large item? So I'd say, the item's one thing, that's the fraud that happened. But any of these cases, I would always go kind of up channel from that and see what were all the steps that the fraudster took to get that item deposited and then get the availability and move the funds out. So there's usually a lot of opportunities ahead of the actual fraud event to see that you're heading in that direction. And so we've been really focused there. And if it becomes all electronic payments, then you're going to want to be even more discerning, as it'll be easier to kind of steal identities and reroute payments. So I would say that's first, like, scan for, is that a good account that you should be opening? And then, once you're being presented with the item, it's that, you're looking for those red flags, right? And we are implementing the real-time API currently as well, but ahead of that, we wanted to get tools out quickly, so our branch teammates are using it. And I think we may hold the record of the most users of the tool. But that's good, because we want to empower folks to just do that extra due diligence to check the various components of the item, no matter where we're taking those in, whether that's over the counter or through an ATM or in a variety of different places. And our detection staff uses it as well. But it's always just in part of an investigation that you're still looking at other red flags. Like I said, is the average daily balance really low, and now all of a sudden this large item's coming in? Does it align with your account type or the demographic or characteristics of other payments of that consumer or business? Is there really anything anomalous? And then really looking at the item as well, as David mentioned, right? It keeps pivoting. And so what used to be like back, like when this first started, those alterations were like pretty obvious. You could see like where it was just like buffed out, and then maybe some of the line was missing and a new name was on top. I mean, like gone are the days where it's good, like where a human eye can really detect the difference. Like comments earlier, like there, it's going to have the hologram, it's going to be on the special paper by like human eye, it's going to look, you know, identical, let alone if it's a mobile deposit or ATM, like it's going to look identical, you know, to an actual treasury item. So putting that item in concert with other signals, and even doing that in your deposit strategy. So, you know, including as many signals as you can in your tools that are scoring your deposits, you know, is beneficial as well. And then, you know, we just have broad use of the dashboard. You know, we enable our team to use that to validate these items for a variety of different use cases. And especially like over the counter in real time, has been really beneficial.
Awesome, Jen. Thanks for that. And yeah, no, it's been great to partner with you guys. I think you like the amount of users did give our PM a bit of a heart attack, but we've been able to handle it, and it's been awesome. Uh, Great. Well, you know, I would love to open it up for more Q&A. I know there are some questions we haven't been able to get to in the chat, so I'm going to go through and harvest those. But if you want to use the Q&A tool at the bottom to submit those, that'll be great. A couple questions about, you know, what's the cost of SentiLink TCVS? SentiLink TCVS is totally free for all financial institutions. We're doing this, you know, as a token of goodwill for all our partners and all the financial institutions out there. We know you guys are strapped for resources. We know the Treasury Department's trying their best to get you guys access. We wanted to just help out. That's our philosophy here. And so it's totally free to use. Both on the API side and our dashboard. Um, so just to look, will your Treasury check verifier also be able to catch the electronic fraud when the checks go electronic? We don't know what that looks like, you know, in the future, but we're going to stay on top of it and continue to help fight fraud. You know, SentiLink, we geek out on fraud, and we'll stay on top of the latest MOs and figure out how we can stop it.
I also think as the Treasury has the RFI out, I think that's got to be part of their
Yeah.
solutioning and thought leadership as they make the pivot, is what controls, what new controls will need to be in place now, as the fraud will pivot and could actually be worse or more pervasive, you know, depending on some of the controls that then will exist, you know, once those paper items are out. So hopefully, you know, a comparable solutions will come with the new methodologies as well.
Yeah, we're hoping so as well. And you know, I think a lot of our systems could use modernization, and hopefully we're headed towards that era with this change. I'm hoping. Somebody asked, hey, what's the benefit of using SentiLink TCVS versus a Treasury provided API key? From an API perspective, relatively little. We've like, you know, made the schema, you know, pretty much the same, made it, you know, slightly easier to use. And then from a dashboard perspective, we built it for you, right? And so that's what we were hearing is, hey, we want to give our frontline people access, but you know, we can't put together the development resources to do so. So that's the real benefit there.
Yeah, I would add to that, just the real benefit from a business perspective is that it's a real-time API call that you can put in your decisioning at the time of your deposit strategy, right? So like that's why you want to have those details in line of your deposit strategy rules too. Like that's the true benefit, because then it's kind of hands off. You're not manually looking these up on a dashboard, but it's actually in your existing deposit strategies. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was so excited to talk about
No,
that.
of course, of course. Right. Yeah. Just you know, in terms of the API we're now providing versus directly with the Treasury,
All right.
it's like equivalent functionality, really. Um, One question here is, how do you determine if a check fraud is first or third party? How can you sort of tell the difference there?
You know, a lot of times you want to be, you know, looking at your account origination. I think if, you know, if you go back and you look at that account origination and that like all indications is that that was true party, that then like altered that item or like then created a counterfeit in their name, that would be more first party. If it's, signs of identity theft, right? So I have stolen an identity, maybe more third party, or had some kind of account takeover scenario. But you won't always know. Intent is hard, right? Like first party requires some assessment of what was that consumer's intent. And it's a hard call, but it's usually like how good you feel about who you are working with when you open that account, if it was the actual person or if it was a stolen identity.
Yeah, in the context of first party, and unfortunately, and as we talked about earlier, we see a lot of kids becoming mules of these types of scams. So we see a lot of runners out there offering these guys easy bucks, sort of speaking. All they have to do is just deposit the check in their account and then provide the runner with the percentages of that. And the kids don't know better, so they do that. I mean, they don't really understand the potential repercussions of what they're doing. I mean, they think that at the end of the day, the worst that can happen is that their bank account will get blocked, not understanding the potential ramification in the future. So I think this is something that we should definitely talk more about, and make sure folks are aware to the fact that this is indeed first party fraud.
Definitely. Have a couple questions here about the information the Treasury Department is providing. One is, why can it, the tools not show the payee name once the check has been processed? And another is, why do they only verify outstanding checks and not process checks? Um, and this is just a limitation on the Treasury Department side. We've told her and asked her contact at the Treasury Department the same thing, I think. Um, again, as we continue to modernize and work, in partnership with the Treasury Department, hopefully they'll listen and give us more tools and more information for longer because some of the timing of that can be a little tight. I don't know, Jen, if Citizens has a perspective there.
No, same. I think it's a constant maturity of the tools.
Is the info shared with the Treasury Department when we flag a mismatch? No, that info is just for you, but sort of relating to another question. Jen, how do you have a contact at the IRS or the Treasury Department that you escalate when you identify a mismatch? Some people have been dropping names, or how would you get in touch if that was something you do?
Not on a mismatch. Obviously, we've got contacts there when we need to investigate an item or we've like taken an item or we're in review, but not necessarily on every mismatch because we're finding them.
Yeah, for sure. Great. One question I'm seeing, Jen, just how are you approaching, you talked about like staying up to date on like your fraud strategy and your how do you do that, right? Like what's your like cadence here for like how often do you review? What are you looking for? Any sort of triggers to like, hey, we need new tools, we need to adapt. How does that work for you at Citizens?
We've put some kind of significant investment in our monitoring program. I'm a big fan that like fraud is going to happen. There's always a little bit of a reactionary process to fraud. You have to wait for some of these trends to pivot. How quickly can you identify that new anomalous patterns are starting to evolve that are seeping through your tools? And they will, right? Like that's the way that the game plays, right? You put in new controls and they circumvent the controls and you constantly are evolving. And so I'd say just have really good monitoring, know as close to those events. We really enforce with our teams, if you see something, say something. And that's from our fraud customer service center, all the way through our detection analysts. We had a recent pivot that we saw in fraud trends, and that was really from our detection analyst saying, hey, I think I'm seeing a new flavor of something, go look at it. And it was a new kind of fraud typology or theme that was starting to emerge that we were able to put in some new strategies on. So I'd say you want really fast oversight of emerging trends. So as often as you can look, whether that's daily, weekly. I think gone are the days, it used to be back in the day, you kind of would wait for charge off. And so a lot of people didn't realize that they had a fraud event until the losses came in, which could be 60 to 90 days after the actual fraud event. And so like you want to be like pulled up as close to that. Hey, as soon as that account goes overdraft or that item returns, you want to understand, why did that happen? Why did we miss? Was it a miss in strategy? Was it a miss in an analyst? What do we want to do to pivot to capture more of those in the future? And the funny thing, I mean, not fine, but like the thing about Treasury is it's got a season, right? All of us go like, oh, it's Treasury season because it's like tax season when like, and there's
Right.
more of those items. And so some of these also have a seasonality as well.
Makes sense.
I think it's a great question. I think there's a lot going on right now in the fraud ecosystem, in the fraud prevention ecosystem. Of folks put a lot of really useful information out there for folks to consume and sort of um, understand what the criminals are talking about and how they're taking advantage of vulnerabilities. So, I strongly recommend folks to find those resources and simply get them, right? Because, we put a lot out there with respect to new MOs. We find, I know there are other parties that are doing that as well. Those are, in my mind, are extremely important for folks to do prevention, like timely prevention. So Jen mentioned there's seasonality of things, seasonality for fraud. The Department of Treasury checks are part of it, but now it's the season for student loans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we see a lot of that, and so folks should be aware of that and do their best to prevent.
We have a question here for Jen from Nicole. Have you used the IRS external leads program and returned funds following the Treasurer indemnification agreement? I'm getting a lot of pushback at my institution not wanting to return funds because our member may sue.
Uh, we have used that. Again, that's not necessarily for my team. That's more of our deposit operations side. But yeah, I mean that they create that process for that reason. And so yes, I would just say yes.
Of course. And then David, one last question here before we go. If somebody wanted to lurk some of the dark corners of the web that you showed us, how would they get started? How do we find these Telegram marketplaces and other places where they're posting this information?
Yeah, I mean, this is a 2 hours presentation we have, so I'll try to summarize it to a minute. You simply need to start doing this. I mean, part of what I do in my professional career is I'm also a professor at Georgia State University, and I lead this research team. And usually, when we have new students who are interested in dark intelligence and they ask me for marching orders, I tell them just go in the lab. You have Tor installed there and try and figure it out yourself, right? I mean, and obviously they have more time than than folks on the call right now to sort of try and figure it out. But I find that the best way to start is simply look for those markets on the darknet. Some of the URLs are actually available on Google. In terms of Telegram, you simply open a Telegram account and start browsing and look for those keywords that the criminals are using in order to sort of try and infiltrate their groups. It takes time. And it takes a lot of effort and dedication, but once you infiltrate, there's a lot of value to the type of information that these guys feel comfortable to share. But I have to say that nowadays, we actually see a lot going on Facebook. We see a lot going on Instagram. We see a lot on ClearNet, like a lot of websites folks are putting out there and advertising all kind of illicit commodities. So yeah, so it's just and Jen and I talk a lot about this. One of the things I really like about my job is that as a researcher, I don't have any deliverable at the end of the day. So I go for a swim every morning trying to figure out what the criminals are out there, what the criminals out there are doing. I'm sorry. So
And I think the entire ecosystem is better off for it, David. So thank you
yeah,
for your hard work and your team. Um, Great. We'll wrap up here then. I posted the link again to get in touch with SentiLink. If you have questions about our Treasury check verification service or anything, go ahead, fill out that form. Our team will be in touch. We're more than happy to help you get any of your questions answered, get you set up if the fit makes sense. But thank you all for your attention and your time. And thank you, Jen and David as well.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.